But let me start with my story, surviving a genocide. And story starts way, way before I was born. Was born in a small country in Central Africa called Rwanda. Very tiny. A lot of people can't find it on the map, unless you've seen the film Hotel Rwanda. The country has a history. There are three ethnic groups: the Hutus, the Twas, and the Tutsis. Hutus being the majority, and then the Tutsis, and then the Twas. And the Twas are actually the indigenous to Rwanda. They were the first to get to Rwanda, but today, if you were to put the Twa people in a stadium, you would still have open seats. And I'm not talking about putting them on the field. A 30,000-seater stadium in a country of 13 million. Rwanda was for a long time ruled by a monarchy, a Tutsi monarchy. And when the Europeans decided to colonize Africa and slice it up into the colonial borders that we have today, Rwanda was first a German colony, and then when Germany lost their colonies, Rwanda became a Belgian colony. During the Belgian colonial era, they introduced identity cards. These identity cards, so I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and in my ID, it has my height, my hair color, eye color, and other attributes. In the Rwandan ID, there was ethnicity also. So colonialism introduced the documentation of ethnicity in the ID cards. People knew, their ancestry, and it's really hard to tell with Rwandans because everybody's black. We speak the same native language, different accents from different parts, but it's all a mix with those three ethnic groups. For the most part, the way that people know is how you know that you have Scottish ancestry, German ancestry, and other things. I mean, it's a little bit easier here. I mean, you can tell who's black, who's native, who's Hispanic, who's Asian. But when you go into your ancestry, you also know I'm German or German descent, I'm Swedish descent, and so on and so forth. People knew it that way, but they didn't actually have it documented. So fast forward after hundreds of years of Tutsi domination and subjugation of Hutus, Twas, and poor Tutsis, and now the colonial masters came and they teamed up with the elite Tutsis and continued to oppress the rest of the Rwandans. There was a revolution, a violent revolution in the late 50s, and people who were with the king left Rwanda. They went into exile. One of the people who left Rwanda was a toddler named Paul Kagame. He is the president of Rwanda today. And he was exiled in Uganda for 30 years. During his time in exile, there was a candidate that ran for election in Uganda, and this candidate, his name is Yoweri Museveni. He's the president of Uganda today. When he lost the election, he started a war, and he recruited a bunch of exiled Rwandans to fight for him. And then he ended up winning the war exactly 40 years ago, in 1986. This guy is still president. Earlier this year, he ran a violent election, and he ran on a ticket to fight against corruption after 40 years in power. Previous times, Museveni ran, and he was too old by their constitution to run, and he changed his birth certificate. This is the same guy who ran to fight corruption. So, he trained Paul Kagame. Paul Kagame became one of his top soldiers in Uganda, and Yoweri Museveni became one of America's top allies in Central and East Africa. And so in 1990 when I was 10 years old, I actually didn't know much geography. My understanding of the world was that everybody is Rwandan. Muhammad Ali, Rwandan. Bob Marley, Rwandan. Michael Jordan, Rwandan. Anyone, Rwanda. I knew it was a part of Rwanda that it was called Europe. And that part had white people, and they spoke Kinyarwanda with a heavy accent. That was my understanding. And one day, coming back to school from lunch, I see all these armored vehicles. I'd never seen armored vehicles, never seen weapons, other than clubs that the policemen carried. The military in Rwanda at the time actually wore these long tan pants and short sleeve Boy Scout looking shirts. It was my first time seeing someone dressed for combat other than just in the movies. So as a 10-year-old, I started understanding, okay, they explained to us Rwanda's been invaded. It was invaded by a group from an ethnic group in Rwanda called the Tutsis. I was like, what is an ethnic group and what is another country? Everybody's Rwandan. And I eventually understood the invasion started in Uganda. It was by a group of exiled Tutsis who also were mixed with the Ugandan military who invaded Rwanda and started this violent war that destroyed a lot of the country. At the time of the invasion, Paul Kagame was here in the US as a Ugandan soldier at Fort Leavenworth in training. He went right back, became Rwandan again, which he was always Rwandan, but now he became a Rwandan rebel. And the US and the UK got behind him, supported this rebellion. The rebellion went on for 3 years. And during that time, ethnic tensions rose. The atrocities that this group was called the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, is the party in power today. This group was committing horrible atrocities. They would call people to meetings like this or into stadiums. They would surround stadiums, throw grenades into the crowds, and people who survived, they would kill them with hand weapons. So it displaced a bunch of people, a lot of people, to the extent that if you were to take every person in the state of North Dakota and displace them out of North Dakota, you will still have people left to displace. There was over 1 million people displaced by that war in a tiny country the size of Maryland. During that time, so this war lasted almost 4 years, from 1990 to 94, which is when a lot of people are familiar with the Rwandan genocide of 1994. In the lead up to the genocide, there were these atrocities. There was the displacement of people. There was terror attacks by these rebels that would go into markets. If anybody's been to other countries, the markets are super crowded. There are thousands of people in those markets. I'm sure if you haven't been to another country, you've seen it on social media. They were going to crowds of people, and instead of explosives, they were committing political assassinations, and the country was rife with weapons. Everywhere was weapons. By the time 1993, 94, early 94 hit, as a young teen, it would have been cheaper for me to buy a grenade than it would have been for me to buy a loaf of bread or a bottle of soda. And so crime that is normally committed, the regular crime was committed now with war weapons. There were explosions everywhere. Fast forward to, during that time, there was a peace deal that was negotiated. Deals. That's another thing that's happening now. There was a peace deal that was negotiated between the government and the rebels, and they allowed the rebels to bring some of their security into the city of Kigali for their dignitaries. And after just a few months of them being there was a meeting between regional presidents. And when the Rwandan president came back to Rwanda on April 6, 1994, his plane was shot. He was with the Burundian president. we heard these two explosions in the city of Kigali, and it was so loud, much louder than the usual gunfire and explosions that we would hear in the city of Kigali. And that attack killed both presidents and everybody on board. And with all the tensions that have been rising, that is what sparked the genocide in 1994. And soon after that, we started hearing bombs. We started hearing shells, explosions from one side, and we would hear them whistle over our heads. And boom, on the other side. And I started hearing all of this noise, things were crumbling all around me, and I was so scared. My stomach was bubbling, I was shaking, I was pacing back and forth, and then eventually I became numb. At the time, it was just me, my mother, and my two sisters. We found out that the president had been killed before all of these explosions. My mother answered the call, and then she got off the call, and she goes, "Hey, the president's plane got shot." And my reaction was, "Oh, I hope the president didn't die, because if he died, we won't be able to finish our soccer tournament." And my sisters look at me and they go, "Oh, Claude, you're so stupid. Don't you remember the last time there was like a politician killed, that the schools were shut down for weeks, and all of these things?" And so right after that, or soon after that, that's when the bombings and the shootings and flashes in the air and all of that stuff, we started seeing that. And I mean, we were terrified. My father was actually here in the US on a scholarship, and he was due to come back in June of '94. Genocide started in April of '94. We got cut off from him. If any of you are parents in the room, or have parents, just think about being cut off for months from your loved ones, and all you see on TV is images, floating bodies on rivers, dead people everywhere. So during this time, like all of these bombings and things like that, that whole night we didn't sleep. We got up, and I was hearing people scream for help. Dogs were barking, animals were making all kinds of noises, and it just felt like the whole world was crumbling around me. When we got up in the morning, the neighborhood looked fine, but people were scared, terrified, and the shelling was still going, and the shootings were still going. Then, the same day, extremist Hutu militias started going from house to house, hunting down Tutsis and killing them with machetes and clubs. And they would sometimes bury the bodies, sometimes they would leave the bodies in the streets, and the bodies were piling up in the street. And when you went outside, the mixture of gunpowder, smoke, all of the dust, and the decomposing human flesh made you want to throw up. And we just imagine a young teen or a child walking past or jumping over dead bodies. That was the experience. And we went into hiding in a little storage shed behind our house. And eventually, and we kept hearing people inside of our house looking for us, looking to kill us. Eventually, some neighbors came. They found us in this shed, bundled us up, and they took us one by one to another neighbor's house. And this is how a lot of people, most people who survived the genocide, actually survived. They were sheltered by their Hutu neighbors. So we sheltered here. The RPF on the other side is shelling like crazy. Not only are they shelling like crazy, they also systematically gathering people, pulling people into crowds, into these little encampments, into these like crowded spaces, and they would take them away from the cameras, away from the media. They were very organized about how they were committing their atrocities. And so they looked like the good guys, but they were committing similar atrocities. They just were really good at hiding it. They were very skilled at media and managing the media access and all of that. So the shelling keeps getting closer and closer. The house we sheltered in got hit. The family says, you can't stay here. There was a bunch of families staying with this family, and they were like, we're gonna hire a vehicle to take you away from Kigali and go to the countryside, and our hope was to go to northwest Rwanda, right near the Congo, where my father is from. We kept getting stopped at checkpoints. We started this trip, it was like 6, 7 a.m., early in the morning. The trip is normally about 3 hours. We traveled all day, and we kept getting stopped at checkpoints, and people were getting, we were getting pulled out, and they were threatening to kill us, and every time somebody would step up and say something, they would leave us alone. We got to one checkpoint. They pulled me and my mother, only two of us, out of the truck. They ordered the truck to leave, sent me to one side of the street, put my mother on the other side of the street, and the guy looks me in the eyes and he says, say goodbye to life. Then they took us away from the street, took us to this little bamboo forest away from the street. There was a carpentry shed in there, and all of a sudden, a bunch of neighbors run up, mostly all women, some older men, some kids, and they started yelling at them and saying, don't kill them, leave them alone, don't kill them, leave them alone. And then this group that was getting ready to kill us, and they were armed to the teeth. They look at us and they say, go talk to those neighbors, borrow some shovels and hoes, and dig your grave because we need to bury you after we kill you. The driver came back, and he came back twice. Each time with a young man with him. And these guys started pleading for us, but our killers refused. Eventually, we got to this place. Remember, the drive is about 3 hours, so we should have been at our destination by, say, 10, 11 a.m., maybe 12 at the latest. It was mid-afternoon when we got to this place. We still hadn't made it to our destination, and we were there for so long. It was pitch black when one of the men who was pleading for us said, you know, this boy and his mother are not going to make it 5 miles from here. Let somebody else kill them. Somehow they agreed to that. And they let us go. We ended up going to a friend's place, and the friend said, we are not going to let you leave this place because if you leave, you might get killed. We stayed with this family. When we got there, it was me, my two sisters, my mother, and a young cousin who was 4 or 5 at the time. The family was a man, a woman, 2 children in a 3-bedroom house. Now add 6 people, and then they kept adding more and more people, and they shared whatever they had, whatever food, whatever they had to drink, that's all we shared. And by the time the bombings got closer and closer, there were over 30 people in this house. And then the RPF kept advancing and shooting indiscriminately everybody, bombing everything in front of them. And I just woke up suddenly hearing all of this commotion outside, and the house that we stayed in was literally on this side of the street was Rwanda. You crossed the street, you're in Congo. It was middle of the night and we started trying to cross. And when we started trying to cross, there were so many people, there were so many animals, and most people just had little belongings, like a mattress or a mat. If you've seen those long lines of people who are fleeing with just little belongings, that was us. There were motorcycles, bicycles, cars, children, chickens, cats, I mean everything. Whatever being and whatever belongings could get out of this place. We started trying to cross the middle of the night. We didn't cross until midday the next day. And you had to keep the hand of the person that you were with, otherwise you would lose them. We ended up actually losing my little cousin who was 4, and we didn't find her until weeks later after searching and searching for a long time. And so she was alone as a 4 or 5-year-old by herself during that time until we found her. When we crossed, I was actually relieved. I was like, man, I'm happy that I don't have to face these genocidal militias. I don't have to face the RPF, you know, all of these people that are going around and killing people. But we were homeless. We had a spoon, a cup, a pot, and a plate. That's all the belongings we had. The place, it was so crowded. There was over 1 million people that crossed over to the other side of the border. Every storefront was occupied with refugees. Every unfinished property was occupied with refugees. We were camped everywhere, and there was nothing to cover. When it rained, we got soaked. When it was hot, we were sitting in it, and it was hot, and it was on volcanic rock, this space that we were on. And there was only one source of water. It was a lake. It's called Lake Kivu that divides Rwanda and Congo. This lake was the one source for drinking water, cooking water, bathing water, and there were animals bathing in this lake. There were dead bodies in this lake from the war and the genocide. But one time when my sister went to, and my sisters are both younger than me, when she went to fetch water in a bucket, she pulled, and the bucket had a head in it, a human head in it. The sanitary conditions were horrible, and people started dying. You would literally see a person run up to the door of the pharmacy, pull the door, and fall down and die of dehydration. And bodies started piling up on the side of the streets again, because this land, you could die on the land, but you could be buried in that land because it was volcanic rock, and they had to transport the bodies to other places. We eventually were rescued out of Congo by American aid workers that my father was able to connect with. When we got to Congo, my mother was able to send a fax to my father's school. My mother has a very distinct handwriting. And so, the school was like, hey, we have a fax here in a language that we don't understand. Can you come and check? My father went to check, and as soon as he saw it, he knew it was my mother's handwriting. So he knew it was still alive. Same for us. The American aid worker took us to Uganda. The plan was for us to get a visa, come to the US, and join my father, but the visa application was denied. So now we're in this place. We are illegal immigrants. We have no status. We're stateless. And it wasn't until months later that we moved to Kenya, and eventually my father got his asylum and we came to the US. When I came